The siege had lasted 47 days, and Ambassador Era knew they were going to die. She stood in the command center of the Coalition stronghold, her bioluminescent skin flickering with pale blue light that betrayed her fear. Around her, holographic displays showed the same terrible story from every angle. The Dominion had surrounded them completely. Their warriors numbered in the hundreds of thousands, a dark tide of chitin and blade limbs that stretched to the horizon in every direction. Fleet Commander slammed one of his 4 massive fists against the tactical console. The reptilian was twice Era's height and built like a walking fortress, but even he looked exhausted. His scales had lost their healthy green shine, turning gray with stress and sleeplessness. 17 hours, he growled. That is how long our shields will last. After that, they will pour through the gaps like water through broken stone. Era's throat membranes tightened. The reinforcement request was sent 30 days ago. Surely the Coalition. The Coalition has abandoned us. His voice was bitter. Prime is not important enough. We are acceptable losses. A young communications officer suddenly straightened at her station. Commander, I am receiving a transmission. Reinforcements have arrived in orbit. Hope flared in Era's chest, bright and desperate. Pushed past her to reach the communications console, his heavy footsteps shaking the floor. How many ships? What class? Give me numbers. The officer's face fell as she read the data. 1 transport vessel, Commander, medium class, approximately 4,000 ground troops. The command center went silent. Era watched expression shift from hope to disbelief to rage in the span of 3 heartbeats. 4,000, his roar echoed off the metal walls. I requested 10 divisions. I requested orbital support. I requested heavy armor and artillery, and they send me 4,000 soldiers. They are from a species called Homo, the officer continued quietly. Origin world designated Earth in the Sol system. I have no combat records for this species in our database. Laughed, but there was no humor in it. Unknown species, unknown capabilities, primitive origin world in an unremarkable system. He turned to face the holographic display of the enemy forces. The Coalition has sent us a joke, a final insult before we die. Era accessed her personal data terminal, searching for information about these humans. What she found did not comfort her. Earth was classified as a Category 7, which meant it was hostile to most forms of life. The planet had extreme temperature variations, a toxic atmosphere by many species standards, and a long history of mass extinction events. The humans themselves appeared to be apex predators who had somehow survived on this deadly world for hundreds of thousands of years. But survival on a harsh world did not mean military capability. That was peaceful and gentle, and Era's people had never developed weapons more advanced than simple tools. Different worlds produce different species. The transport is requesting landing coordinates, the communications officer reported. Waved a dismissive hand. Let them land. Perhaps they can serve as a distraction while we attempt a breakthrough. He paused, then added with grim humor, at least 4,000 more bodies will slow the advance by a few minutes. The human transport touched down an hour later in the courtyard of the stronghold. Era went to meet them, driven by diplomatic duty and simple curiosity. She had never seen a human before, and she suspected she would not have many more opportunities to see anything at all. The transport's ramp lowered with a hiss of hydraulics, and the humans emerged. They were smaller than she had expected. Most of them stood shorter than the average, with soft skin in various shades of brown, pink, and tan. They had only 2 arms and 2 legs, no natural armor, no claws, no obvious weapons built into their bodies. They looked fragile, almost delicate. But something about the way they moved made Era's instincts tighten with unease. They walked with a quiet efficiency, their eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. They carried weapons, primitive projectile devices that used chemical explosions to launch metal fragments. but they held them with the casual familiarity of beings who had used such tools their entire lives. A human male approached her. He was older than the others, with gray hair and deep lines carved into his face. His eyes were dark and steady, holding a calm that seemed completely wrong for their desperate situation. He wore simple combat armor and carried a sidearm at his hip. "Ambassador," his voice was rough but not unkind. "I am General, Commanding Officer of the Terran Volunteer Legion. We are here to assist with the defense of Prime." Era's throat membranes fluttered nervously. "General, I must be honest with you. I am grateful for your presence, but I fear you do not understand the situation. They have over 200,000 warriors surrounding this position. Our shields will fail within hours. We are going to be overrun." Nodded slowly. "I read the tactical briefings during transit. I understand the numbers." "Then you understand that 4,000 soldiers, no matter how brave, cannot change the outcome of this battle." Era hated the words even as she spoke them. "I am sorry. I wish I could offer you hope, but I will not lie to you. You have come here to die." The human general smiled. It was a strange expression, neither happy nor sad, but somehow containing both emotions at once. "Ambassador, my people have been fighting hopeless battles since before your species discovered fire. We have faced extinction more times than our historians can count. We have survived ice ages, plagues, predators, and each other." He paused, and his smile faded into something harder. "Show us to the front." Era led him to the command center, where was coordinating the final defensive preparations. The commander barely glanced at before returning his attention to the tactical displays. "Your soldiers may reinforce the eastern wall," said dismissively. "That is where the will strike first. I do not expect you to hold for long, but every minute counts." Studied the display for a long moment. "With respect, Commander, I would like to position my forces at the northern breach instead." His head snapped around. "The northern breach? That is where our shields are weakest. That is where the heaviest fighting will occur." "Yes," agreed. "That is why we should be there." "Your soldiers are using projectile weapons, chemical propellants and metal slugs against battle armor. You will be slaughtered." His expression did not change. "Our weapons are simple, but they work, and my soldiers know how to use them." He met his gaze without flinching. "We did not come here to hide behind others, Commander. We came here to fight." Something shifted in the air between the two commanders. Era watched his posture change, his dismissive attitude giving way to something that might have been respect, or perhaps just curiosity. "Very well," the said finally. "The northern breach is yours. I hope your confidence is not misplaced." Through the night, Era watched the humans prepare their positions. They worked with mechanical precision, digging trenches, setting up weapons, creating overlapping fields of fire. They spoke to each other in low voices, sometimes laughing at jokes she did not understand. A few of them sang songs in languages she had never heard. She approached Captain, a human female who was organizing medical supplies near the front line. The captain was young by human standards, with black hair pulled back in a tight knot and quick, clever hands that sorted bandages and surgical tools with practiced ease. "Are you not afraid?" Era asked. Looked up at her with an unreadable expression. "Of course I am afraid. Only fools feel no fear before battle." "Then why are you here? Why did any of you come?" The captain was quiet for a moment, her hand still moving automatically through the medical supplies. "My grandmother was a survivor," she said finally. "She lived through terrible things, war, radiation, the loss of everyone she loved. She used to tell me that fear is not the enemy. Giving up is the enemy." Met Era's eyes. "We came because someone needed help. That is enough reason." Dawn broke over Prime, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. The shields flickered once, twice, and then collapsed entirely with a sound like breaking glass. The charged. Era watched from the command center, her skin pulsing with cold blue light. The first wave of warriors crashed against the northern breach like a living tsunami, thousands of blade limbs and armored bodies surging toward the human positions. The humans opened fire. The sound was deafening, not the clean hum of plasma weapons, but a continuous roar of chemical explosions and metal impacts. Warriors fell in waves, their armor cracking and shattering under the barrage. But more came, always more, climbing over the bodies of their fallen to reach the defenders. And then something impossible happened. The humans held. Era watched as the first wave broke against the human line and was thrown back. They regrouped and charged again, and again they were stopped. The humans fought with a ferocity that seemed to border on madness, firing, reloading, firing again, dragging wounded comrades to safety without breaking formation. Commander stood beside her, his four arms hanging limp at his sides. His mouth was open, his eyes wide with something that looked like shock. "They are holding," he whispered. "By all the gods of the void, they are actually holding." They launched a third charge and a fourth. Each time the humans pushed them back. Bodies piled in the breach, forming gruesome barriers that the attackers had to climb over. The humans used everything, guns, knives, bare hands when necessary. They would not break. They would not run. Era felt her understanding of the universe shift beneath her feet. These soft, fragile creatures from an unremarkable world were doing what the greatest warriors of the coalition could not do. They were stopping the unstoppable. And they were just getting started. The battle for the northern breach lasted 72 hours. Era stopped sleeping after the first day. She could not tear herself away from the tactical displays, watching the impossible unfold in real time. The humans lost soldiers, many soldiers, but they refused to give ground. When one fell, others stepped forward to fill the gap. When ammunition ran low, they took weapons from the dead and kept fighting. On the second day, she began researching Earth's history in earnest. What she found made her sick with horror and awe. Humans had been killing each other for their entire existence. They had fought wars over territory, resources, ideology, religion, and sometimes for reasons that made no sense at all. They had developed weapons specifically designed to cause maximum suffering. They had wiped out entire cities in single explosions. They had survived plagues that killed half their population and come back stronger than before. But the more she read, the more she noticed something else. Amid all the violence and death, there were stories of survival, stories of people who endured unimaginable hardship and refused to surrender. Stories of soldiers who gave their lives for strangers, of medics who walked into fire to save the wounded, of ordinary people who found extraordinary courage when their backs were against the wall. Humans were not simply violent, they were survivors. Captain worked without rest, treating wounded coalition soldiers alongside her own people. Era found her in the medical tent on the second night, carefully stitching closed a wound on a young warrior's arm. "Why do you help them?" The question came out before Era could stop it. "Your own people are dying. Should you not focus on them?" Did not look up from her work. "Everyone who survives today is someone who can fight tomorrow. That is what my training taught me." She tied off the suture and finally met Era's eyes. "But the truth is simpler than that. They are in pain. I can help. That is enough." The warrior stared at the human with an expression Era could not identify. When moved on to her next patient, he flexed his arm experimentally and then picked up his weapon and walked back toward the front line. On the third day, Hive General changed tactics. They stopped their mass charges and began probing attacks, testing the human defenses for weaknesses. Small groups of warriors would rush forward, engage briefly, and then retreat. They were learning, adapting, trying to understand these strange new enemies. General adapted as well. He reorganized his lines, shifted soldiers to cover weak points, and set up ambush positions to catch the probing attacks off guard. When Era watched him work, she saw no panic, no desperation. He moved pieces on the tactical board with the calm precision of someone playing a game he had played 1,000 times before. "How do you stay so calm?" she asked him during a brief lull in the fighting. "Your soldiers are dying. The situation is still desperate. How are you not afraid?" Was quiet for a moment, watching the distant flashes of combat through the command center's viewports. "I am afraid," he said finally. "I have been afraid since the moment we landed, but fear is an old companion for my people. We have learned to work alongside it." "I do not understand." "On Earth, fear kept us alive. It warned us of predators, of dangers, of threats to our survival. The humans who felt no fear died young. The humans who let fear control them died as well." He turned to look at her, and his eyes were very old. "The humans who survived were the ones who felt the fear and acted anyway. We learned that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else is more important." "And what is more important to you now?" Smiled his strange, sad smile. "Those soldiers out there trusted me to lead them. They followed me across the stars to fight for people they have never met. The least I can do is stand beside them until the end." That evening, a raiding party managed to capture one of the human soldiers. Sergeant was a large man with dark skin and a booming laugh that Era had heard echoing across the fortifications during the brief moments of quiet. He had been cut off from his unit during a counterattack and dragged behind enemy lines. The transmitted footage of the interrogation, hopping to break human morale. Hive General appeared on screen, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction as his warriors applied pain stimulators to the captured human. "Did not scream," he laughed. "My grandmother survived 3 years in a prison camp," he said through gritted teeth, blood running down his face. "You will have to do better than this." The transmission cut off abruptly. Era later learned that had somehow worked his hands free and killed 2 of his captors before being subdued. He died with a smile on his face and a curse on his lips. But the effect of that transmission was not what they had intended. The humans did not break. They fought harder. They screamed his name as they charged, using his death as fuel for their rage. The assault that night was thrown back with losses that made even pause. On the morning of the 4th day, the Era could not believe it at first. She watched the tactical display, certain it must be a trick, a feint to draw out the defenders. But the warriors were truly retreating, pulling back from the stronghold in orderly formations. Commander stood beside her, his massive form trembling with exhaustion and disbelief. "They are leaving," he said, his voice hoarse. "By the gods, they are actually leaving." General entered the command center, his uniform torn and stained with blood, some of it his own, most of it not. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 days. "They are not leaving," he said quietly. "They are regrouping, reconsidering." He studied the tactical display with tired eyes. "They expected us to break. When we did not, they lost their advantage. Now they must decide if the cost of victory is worth paying." "You think they will return?" "Perhaps, perhaps not," shrugged wearily. "We have bought time, that is all we could do." In the silence that followed, Era looked out at the battlefield. Bodies covered the ground in layers and human alike. The northern breach was a charnel house, the earth soaked dark with blood and ichor. But the stronghold still stood. The coalition forces still held their ground. And somewhere out there, Hive General was learning a terrible lesson about the species called humanity. They had come from an unremarkable world in an unremarkable system. They carried primitive weapons and wore simple armor. They were soft, fragile creatures with short and countless biological weaknesses. And they had stopped the unstoppable. Era looked at General, at the exhausted soldiers filtering back from the front lines, at the medics still working to save the wounded. She thought about what she had learned about Earth, about human history, about the endless cycle of war and survival that had shaped this strange species. "What happens now?" she asked. Smiled his sad smile one more time. "Now we rest, we mourn our dead, We prepare for whatever comes next. He paused, looking out at the battlefield. And we remember why we came here. Why did you come here, General? Truly. The old soldier was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost gentle. Because someone needed help, and because my people have learned after thousands of years of fighting that the only battles worth dying for are the ones you fight for someone else. Era felt something shift inside her. She had spent her entire life believing that violence was simple, that warriors were tools to be used and discarded. But these humans had shown her something different. They fought not because they loved war, but because they understood its cost. They killed not because they were monsters, but because they were trying to protect the people they loved. They had retreated, but the real battle was just beginning. Era knew that the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. These survivors had announced themselves to the universe, and their message was simple. We will fight for you, we will die for you, and we will never ever give up. 6 standard months after the siege of Prime, the Galactic Coalition Council convened an emergency session. The Grand Chamber on the capital world of was filled with representatives from hundreds of species, all gathered to discuss a single topic: humanity. Ambassador Era stood at the speaker's podium, her bioluminescent skin glowing with nervous energy. She had spent the months since the siege traveling between worlds, gathering testimony, collecting data, building a case that she now had to present to the most powerful beings in the galaxy. High Arbiter sat at the center of the council dais, his ancient crystalline form pulsing with slow, thoughtful light. He was the oldest living member of the coalition, a being of pure energy who had watched civilizations rise and fall across. His voice echoed through the chamber like wind chimes in a storm. The application of the human species for full coalition membership has been received and reviewed. Before we proceed to discussion, we will hear testimony from those who have witnessed human capabilities firsthand. Era stepped forward. She had prepared this speech for weeks, rewriting it dozens of times, trying to capture something that words could barely contain. Honored council members, I was present at the siege of Prime. I watched 4,000 human soldiers hold a position against 200,000 warriors for 72 hours. I saw them bleed and die and refuse to surrender. And I came to understand something that changed everything I believed about war, about courage, and about what it means to be a civilization. She paused, letting her words settle over the chamber. Humans are not like us. They evolved on a world that tried to kill them every single day of their existence. They survived ice ages, plagues, predators, and their own violent history. They have been fighting since before they could walk upright, and they have never stopped. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Era could see fear on many faces, suspicion on others. The delegation was already shaking their heads, their tentacles curling with distaste. The representatives sat in stony silence, their armored bodies rigid with tension. Many of you fear them, Era continued. You look at their history and see only violence. You see weapons designed for maximum destruction, wars fought over trivial causes, suffering inflicted on an unimaginable scale. And you ask yourselves, what happens when these turn against us? She activated the holographic display behind her. Images from Prime filled the chamber, human soldiers fighting, dying, protecting coalition troops alongside their own. I asked myself the same question, and then I spent 6 months searching for the answer. I studied human history, their culture, their philosophy. I spoke with their soldiers, their leaders, their ordinary citizens, and I found something I did not expect. The display shifted to show a human memorial wall, names carved in stone in 100 different languages. Humans do not celebrate war. They mourn it. Every human culture has rituals for honoring the dead, for remembering the cost of violence. They build monuments not to victory, but to loss. They tell stories not of glory, but of sacrifice. General entered the chamber, walking slowly down the central aisle. He wore a formal uniform now, medals on his chest and gray hair neatly combed. But his eyes were the same as they had been on Prime, calm, steady, carrying the weight of things that could not be unseen. High Arbiter's voice resonated through the chamber. "General, you command the forces that defended Prime. You have requested the opportunity to address this council directly." "I have, High Arbiter." His voice was quiet but carried easily in the vast space. "I understand that many here fear my people. That fear is reasonable. We have done terrible things throughout our history. We have killed millions of our own kind in wars that served no purpose. We have built weapons capable of destroying entire worlds." The chamber was utterly silent. "But I want you to understand why we came to Prime. We did not come for conquest. We did not come for resources or territory or political advantage." He paused, and something shifted in his expression. "We came because someone needed help." "A generous claim," the ambassador interrupted, his voice harsh and grating. "But how can we trust the intentions of a species with your history? What assurance can you offer that humans will not turn your military capabilities against the coalition itself?" Nodded slowly as if he had expected this question. "I cannot offer assurances, Ambassador. I can only offer truth." He gestured toward the holographic display. "For 300,000 years, humans have been fighting to survive. Fighting each other, fighting our world, fighting everything that threatened our existence. And in all that time, we have learned one lesson above all others." "And what lesson is that?" "That fighting is not living." His voice dropped, becoming almost gentle. "We have won countless wars, Ambassador. We have defeated every enemy that stood against us, and every victory left us with graves to dig and children to bury. Every triumph brought us closer to understanding that war is not an end, it is a failure. A failure of communication, of empathy, of imagination." He turned to address the full chamber. "We came to Prime because we finally have the chance to use our skills for something other than survival. For the first time in our history, we can fight for people who are not us, protect civilizations we have never met, build something larger than ourselves. We are tired, honored council. We are tired of fighting for nothing. We want the fighting to mean something." Silence hung over the chamber like a held breath. Era watched the faces of the council members, trying to read their reactions. She saw doubt, fear, confusion, but also something else, something that looked almost like hope. High Arbiter spoke again. "You say that humans wish to protect others, but protection requires sacrifice. Are your people truly willing to die for species they have never encountered, for causes that do not directly benefit Earth?" Smiled his sad smile. "High Arbiter, we have been dying for each other since the beginning of our existence. We have given our lives for family, for friends, for complete strangers. We have walked into fire to rescue people we hated, fought to defend beliefs we did not share, sacrificed everything for causes that seemed hopeless." His smile faded. "Dying is not the hard part for humans. Living with the cost of violence, that is the hard part. We have been carrying that weight for a very long time." Captain stepped forward from the human delegation. She still carried herself with the same quiet efficiency Era remembered from the medical tent on Prime. "Permission to speak, High Arbiter." Inclined his crystalline form. "Granted." Looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from 100 different species. "I am a medic. My job is to keep people alive. On Prime, I treated soldiers, diplomats, and my own squad members. I did not ask about their species or their politics before I helped them. I asked only one question: are you in pain?" She paused. "That is who humans are. We see suffering and we want to stop it. We see injustice and we want to fight it. We are not perfect, we have caused terrible suffering ourselves. But we are trying to do better. That is all any species can do." The ambassador rose from his seat, tentacles waving with agitation. "Pretty words, but they did not retreat because of your compassion. They retreated because you killed thousands of their warriors. You are predators wearing the masks of healers." "Yes," said simply, "we are predators, we are also healers. We are warriors and poets, killers and caretakers. We are everything, ambassador, because we have had to be everything to survive." Her voice hardened. "But we choose what we want to become, and we choose to be more than our worst impulses." The debate continued for hours. Delegates argued about human history, about the risks of admitting a species to the coalition, about the strategic implications of having such capable warriors as allies or enemies. Fear and suspicion warred with pragmatism and hope. Finally, as the artificial lights of the chamber dimmed to simulate evening, High Arbiter raised a crystalline appendage for silence. "I have heard all arguments, I have reviewed all evidence, and I have reached a conclusion." His ancient voice seemed to carry the weight of ages. "The human species is dangerous. Their history is soaked in blood. Their capacity for violence exceeds that of almost any known civilization." Era felt her heart sink. But danger is not evil. Violence is not wickedness. The humans have demonstrated something that I have rarely seen in my long existence: the ability to transform their darkest impulses into something noble. They fight not because they love destruction, but because they have learned, through endless suffering, that some things are worth fighting for. His crystalline form brightened, pulsing with warm light. "I recommend full membership in the Galactic Coalition for the Human Species. May they teach us what it means to endure." The vote was close, but the motion carried. Humans were officially welcomed into the galactic community, not despite their violent past, but because of the wisdom that past had given them. 3 years later, Era stood on the surface of Prime, watching a memorial ceremony unfold. Human veterans had returned to honor the fallen, some of them old now, gray-haired and weathered, others still young but carrying scars that would never fully heal. Many had brought their families, showing their children the place where history had changed. A young child tugged at the sleeve of an old human soldier, a man with a mechanical arm and a face mapped with ancient burned scars. "Were you scared?" the child asked. "During the battle?" The veteran knelt down, bringing himself to the child's eye level. His joints creaked with age, but his eyes were gentle. "Every single moment," he said. "I was terrified. I thought I was going to die every minute of those 3 days." "Then why did you fight?" The old man smiled, and it was the same smile Era had seen on General's face all those years ago. Sad and gentle, and full of something that might have been wisdom or might have been love. "Because I had friends worth being afraid for." The child nodded seriously, as if this made perfect sense. Perhaps it did. Perhaps the greatest truths were always simple enough for children to understand. Era looked at the memorial wall, where names were carved in languages from 100 human cultures, names from every continent of Earth, every tradition, every belief system. Chinese characters next to Arabic script, African names beside European ones, ancient and modern mixed together in endless rows. This was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not their weapons, not their ferocity, but their stubborn, unbreakable refusal to abandon each other. They had fought and died and suffered for thousands of years, and through all that darkness they had kept one truth alive: no one fights alone. The ceremony ended as the sun set over Prime, painting the sky in the same red and gold that had marked the dawn of the battle 3 years before. The veterans gathered their families and began the slow walk back to their ships, leaving flowers and tokens at the base of the memorial. Era stayed until the last of them had gone, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled the borders of Coalition space, protecting worlds that had once feared them. Somewhere out there, human doctors worked in alien hospitals. Human engineers built bridges between stars. Human teachers shared their hard-won wisdom with species who had never known war. They had come from an ancient, shaped by violence and suffering, into something extraordinary. They carried their scars with them wherever they went, never forgetting the cost of what they had survived. and they used that knowledge to protect others, to heal wounds, to build a future where their children might never have to fight. The alien had been stunned when the veterans of that ancient entered the battlefield. But Era understood now that the stunning part was not their ferocity. It was their compassion. It was their hope. It was their unshakable belief that even the darkest history could be transformed into light. And as she walked away from the memorial, her bioluminescent skin glowing softly in the starlight, Era knew that the galaxy would never be the same.